Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teachly University. And in this lecture today, we're going to be discussing Moneyball and developing systems for results. Moneyball being the title of Michael Lewis's book, based on the Oakland Athletics and Billy Beane's system on how he was able to build a championship caliber team at a fraction of the cost when compared to the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox. So even if whether you're a baseball fan or not, there's going to be a lot you're going to get out of this course and how it can help you developing systems to help you get results in your business and personal life. And I want to start with a quote from the owner of the Boston Red Sox and financier John Henry, who said, "I'm a tough manager. I question almost every assumption in what are hopefully pragmatic ways. The more you question, the more you learn, and the more the person you are questioning learns." So, what I love about this quote, which I think is the essence of this lecture, is that we have to begin questioning these narratives and the conventional wisdom that we are exposed to in many fields, whether it's in business and academia and the sciences and the corporate world, or in sports, or in other fields and aspects of our lives. There's these narratives and conventional wisdoms that, frankly, are more than likely outdated and don't really serve our best interests at heart if we follow them. And I think you'll see why this is important when I introduce you to Billy Beane. And Billy Beane was the general manager of the Oakland Athletics. And again, he was the subject of Michael Lewis's book. He's a fascinating character, and we're going to dive into him and really what led him to make some profound changes that really, I think, transformed baseball and really, I think, economics in general. And Billy, before becoming the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, was in fact a star high school athlete in both baseball and football back in the early 1980s. And in fact, Billy was going to get a full scholarship or received a full scholarship to go to Stanford, but he was also got a very lucrative baseball contract to play Major League Baseball for the Mets. And many scouts at the time believed that Billy was going to be an all-star caliber player. He was considered to be a five-tool player where he could pretty much do it all. He could hit, he could throw, he could steal bases, he could hit for average and power. He could do it all. And he was considered to be like the next Darryl Strawberry, who at the time was one of the top baseball players in the game. So Billy naturally took the baseball contract and signed with the Mets. But unfortunately, he didn't quite live up to the expectations that many scouts had of him. He had a good career. Just to be able to play professional baseball is an amazing accomplishment. And he, I think, had a pretty good career, but didn't quite live up to those expectations. And he bounced back and forth between the minor leagues and the majors for well over close to a decade before he eventually retired in 1990 with the Oakland Athletics, where he eventually decided to work in the back office for the Oakland Athletics under Sandy Adelson, who at the time was the general manager of the Athletics, who also during the late 1980s went to three consecutive World Series championships. So the A's were a very prolific team up until they eventually had to slash their payroll, where they just ended up not being the type of team that was able to build a World Series caliber team, say like with the larger market teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox. So flash forward to 2001, the Oakland Athletics, led by Jason Giambi and Johnny Damon, who were some of the top players in the game, were made it to the American League Division Series and really were in a good position to, I think, eventually go on to the World Series. But unfortunately, they fell to the New York Yankees when the Yankees eventually went on to the World Series and eventually to fall to the Arizona Diamondbacks. But that is not the entire story. The fact is, during the offseason, Jason Giambi and Johnny Damon were eventually free agents and were signed by the New York Yankees. Giambi signed a very lucrative deal with the New York Yankees, and Johnny Damon signing with the Boston Red Sox. So it was this event that I think Billy Beane really, I think, pushed him over the edge. And I think he had these suspicions already, but he was really beginning to see that it was almost impossible for small market teams like the Oakland Athletics to compete against large market teams like the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox, who had so much money they could just buy almost any player they want and build like virtually an all-star team, which made it very difficult for teams like the Athletics and other small market teams to compete at the major league level. So Billy had to improvise and come up with new ways of doing things. So just to discuss a little bit of inside baseball, part of my pun there, but just to give you some little inside baseball, how it is that traditionally how players were evaluated and how teams were built was really from a subjective point of view, especially by scouts, where scouts would pick players or draft players because maybe they had a good physique, they had a good attitude, or maybe they performed a certain way, or they followed their gut instinct, and instead of using more objective measures on how to evaluate players. But during the 1990s, the Oakland Athletics began experimenting with something called sabermetrics, which was something crafted by baseball historian and statistician Bill James, which is essentially studying baseball through data and statistical analysis, which was used as a way to evaluate players and build teams based on statistics. And Sandy Allison at the time, who was the general manager of the Oakland Athletics in the 1990s, began really experimenting with this. And it was really Billy Beane that was introduced to this, uh, also in large part to Bill James' work, where they began experimenting with stats. And I think really it was after the 2001 season when Billy really began using statistics as a way to build a team, a championship caliber team at a fraction of the cost. So they started using data like slugging percentage and on base percentage, which are measurements of how many hits and how many bases a player would get. So the higher the number, essentially, the more promising a player is when it comes to their hitting prowess. So essentially, what Billy was doing was buying base hits and runs at a fraction of the cost, or for 50 cents on the dollar. And they use, of course, other measurements to pick different players like pitchers and all that. But the point is that Billy was doing things differently. He bucked the conventional wisdom of Major League Baseball, which for him doing this at the time was very controversial. But he did it anyway because he felt so much pain and disappointment and recognized this frustration that he was experiencing with the Oakland Athletics, that he wanted to make this change so not only he can be more competitive, or the Oakland Athletics could be more competitive, but to change the game of baseball, and that he did. So here we have Bill James, who eventually was signed or began working with the Boston Red Sox thanks to John Henry. But John Henry, in fact, offered Billy Beane at the time, which was one of the most lucrative contracts in history for a general manager. But Billy Beane turned it down because he promised himself that he would never make a decision just for the money again. And this was because of what he went through as a young ball player, where signing with the New York Mets, making a decision just for the money, and he promised himself that he would never make that decision again. But long story short, as Billy turned down the job, the general manager role for the Boston Red Sox, um, the Red Sox eventually went on to win the World Series for the first time in a number of years. So now you can make the argument as to whether or not Billy Beane made the right decision or not. It was his decision and his alone to make. But the point is that Billy changed baseball and changed the game. And he did it because he began asking questions as to whether or not what was the current narrative or conventional wisdom of doing things was the only way of doing it. He began questioning that. So, and really in 2002, thanks to what Billy did and what the Oakland Athletics did when it comes to using sabermetrics and building their team based on this data, they were able to basically have one of the best records in baseball, and in fact win 20 games in a row, which was a major league record at the time. And they eventually went on to return to the ALDS, unfortunately only to fall to the Minnesota Twins. But the point is here, as I said, that Billy Beane and the Oakland Athletics were able to build a team, a championship caliber team, at a fraction of the cost. So there's one of the lessons that we can learn from this is that if you could figure out a way to do things more efficiently at a lower cost, or if you could figure out a way to get extraordinary results at a lower cost, that is something that can really get the attention of companies and corporations and entrepreneurs and business people and customers. So it's something to think about as we explore systems development. So as I said, that because of Billy Beane and what he did with the Oakland Athletics, it was the inspiration for the book Moneyball by Michael Lewis, which was eventually made into a feature film starring Brad Pitt, who played Billy Beane. So what can we get out of all this, what we discussed so far in the first 10 minutes of this lecture? Well, I think what we can learn is that what Billy Beane discovered is baseball, like life, can be an unfair game. And if you want to level the playing field, it requires developing business and personal systems to achieve extraordinary results. So the metaphor that life is unfair, it's one of many metaphors to describe life and business and relationships and human interaction. There's a lot of metaphors. So you can agree or disagree whether or not life is unfair. Some people say, oh, that's not true. Or some people say, well, yeah, that's true. But whatever you believe, whether you agree with that metaphor or not, I think we can all agree that many of us will be in situations where we're going to be at a disadvantage, whether it's applying to a job that we're not necessarily qualified for, or perhaps we start a business in an industry that is highly competitive, where we're going up against other businesses that have far more capital and better products and services than you're offering right now, or perhaps you're debating someone who is far more knowledgeable about a particular topic than you, or maybe you're an athlete or in a team that's going up against another team that is far superior than you. There's going to be times we're going to be at a disadvantage, and in order for us to level the playing field or even move to where we have the advantage, it requires then developing systems or adopting certain procedures or doing things a certain way that can increase the probability of success. So, what is a system? Well, a system, as defined, there's two definitions for what a system is, and this is from the Oxford Dictionary. A system is a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or an interconnecting network. So, for example, we all participate in an economic system or free market economy, from the stocks that you purchase for your investment portfolio to that Apple iPhone that you purchase from the Apple Store. We all participate in an economic system of purchasing goods and services, and that's a system that is interconnected. And our economy now is a global economy. The whole world has become much smaller because of our global economy that is interconnected. But another definition of a system is also a set of principles or procedures according to which something is done, an organized framework or method. So all of us have procedures and principles and habits that we follow on a daily basis. We do the same things repetitively over and over again every day. And many of these behaviors and these ways that we act and these habits that we have every day are unconscious. They're unconscious behaviors that are part of our personality trait or traits that have been cemented in our personality through years of repetition, that we think and act and behave in certain ways without us even realizing it. And we adopt systems for our jobs and our careers. We do things a certain way at work every single day that gets a certain amount of results. So a system then, and I think for the purposes, and then there could be other definitions of a system I think that we can explore, but I think we can agree that one really good definition of a system is a set of habits or procedures designed to achieve a specific goal. So in the case, for example, of Billy Beane and the Oakland Athletics developed a new system to be able to evaluate, recruit, and build and recruit players and build teams based on a new system of using data and statistical analysis and stats to build teams and recruit players. So they built a new system that was a departure from an old system that they used for a number of years to build teams. So, with a specific goal, which was to win a championship. That was ultimately the goal, which is to win. They were able to build a team with this new system, a championship team, at a fraction of the cost. So, why are systems so important? Well, I think, as many of you will agree, we live in a very complicated world that, in its vastness, has grown smaller because everything is so interconnected. And in this complexity, it requires then doing things a certain way and beginning to learn how to use trial and error to adopt new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things in business and academia and entrepreneurship and the arts, so that we can get extraordinary results. Because really, this is something that we really have to begin thinking about, is that failure doesn't necessarily exist, is that we're just not getting the results that we would like to get in many facets of our life. And in order for us then to perhaps increase the probability of success, it requires then adopting new systems or new procedures and habits and ways of doing things that perhaps can buck the conventional wisdom, that perhaps then we can increase the probability of success. So what types of systems exist? What are some examples of systems? Well, there are investing or trading systems. So for example, there's some investors that will look at the fundamentals or look at the balance sheet, income statements, and other financials as a way to measure whether or not they're going to, or to decide, help them decide whether they're going to invest in a particular stock, or trading systems that are more for short-term trades or investments, where perhaps traders will use technical analysis and price to volume action, and perhaps looking at underlying trends in the overall market and what the stock is doing or asset is doing in order for them to help them make a decision. The point is that they look for certain criteria. They do things a certain way, that, or they follow a system and they don't deviate from that system regardless of how they're feeling. They follow that system to the T so that they can get specific results, which in this case is making more money. Of course, there's also mental models and systems, and Charlie Munger is an advocate of this. Charlie Munger being Warren Buffett's right-hand man in Berkshire Hathaway. There's mental models and ways of thinking where we evaluate our own decisions and we begin making new choices and making new decisions that are, again, a departure from our old ways of thinking. And again, Billy Beane did this. I think he adopted a new way of thinking, not just a new system of evaluating players, but a new way of thinking about baseball and even, I think, economics as a whole. Because I think that the two go hand in hand when it comes to systems and how to get results and how we evaluate the world around us. There's also nutrition and fitness regimens as well. Look how many diet books are out there. There's all these nutrition and fitness regimens and systems that exist. And there's all these different ones, and you can make the arguments as to that maybe some are better than others. And there could be a case for that. But in any case, there are different systems or nutrition and health and exercise regimens that you can follow. As I mentioned, there's also economic systems, societal and social and cultural systems that we participate in. That it's this course of human interaction where these systems naturally develop and occur and form organically, where new trends begin to emerge as a result of these systems and this interconnected society that we live in. So in order for us to develop a system, we need to begin getting very clear and specific about your goals and develop systems around achieving that goal. So if you want to make more money, for example, or maybe to put it more simply, if you want to be able to save more money and save capital so you can save that money to invest or make a purchase, then you need to develop a system on how you're going to be able to save money on a given basis. So for example, a simple system could be that for every paycheck you get, you put 20% away. And from that money that you save, perhaps you put 10% of it in your Roth IRA. That could be an overly simplistic system that you could follow, but that's just one of many examples of a system that you can come up with that if you follow consistently or repetitively, you can achieve a specific result. So what's an example of a system? Well, let's say for example's sake here for this lecture, you want to lose weight and maybe you want to lose 20 pounds. So you basically develop a fitness system, or maybe with the help of your personal trainer or your physician, you develop a fitness system that every day you're going to wake up maybe at 6:30 and you're going to meditate for 30 minutes. You're going to do weight training for 3 days a week, and you'll do aerobic exercise for 1 to 2 days a week, and you also avoid sugars and processed foods. And this is where you can get very specific about which foods you're going to eat and which ones you're going to avoid. And then you also eat several servings of fruit and vegetables per day. Now, this is just one example of a fitness or health system that you can follow. Again, there's so many different diet books. The point is, it's a set of procedures that you're following every single day that over time will yield a specific result, which is in this case that we want to get in shape and lose 20 pounds. So developing proper systems requires using pain and pleasure as leverage to use systems on a consistent basis while developing the flexibility to make changes when necessary. Going back to our example with our fitness regimen, well, why do we even take the time to follow a system to lose weight? Well, because right now you're at a point where you're experiencing so much pain based on your current weight. Maybe because you don't have much confidence in yourself, you don't like the way you look, maybe you're having some underlying health issues that need to be addressed. You're experiencing so much pain, or you want to think about the pain of not following through with the system, that you use it as leverage to be able to make these changes and to follow a system, which is ultimately to achieve pleasure, the pleasure of being able to lose weight, to be healthier, to be more confident in yourself, to like the way you look in the mirror. And it's using pain and pleasure ultimately as leverage to use and develop systems to achieve a particular result. So, how do we then get more specific with using pain and pleasure? Well, we have to think about the why. Why is it, for example, are you following a system to lose weight? Why? Well, you want to lose weight because, again, as I mentioned, you want to be able to live long enough to play with your grandkids, or maybe you want to look better in front of a mirror in a swimsuit, or maybe you just want to be able to compete in, a triathlon. There could be a number of reasons as to why, but in order for us to achieve our goals and to develop worthwhile systems that can help us get there, we need to understand why it is we're doing what we're doing. And then the what if. What if you succeeded? What would that feel like? Or what would it feel like if you failed? Again, using pain as leverage. What would happen if you didn't follow through on what it is that you want to do? Again, these are things to think about. We have to begin getting specific and questioning why it is that we do what we do. We need motivation in order for us to stick with a system and be able to pivot and make corrections when necessary. Without that motivation, without that leverage, it becomes harder for us to be able to achieve our goals. So when we associate more pleasure than pain in sticking with our system, we increase the probability of achieving our goal. So we need that motivation. And ultimately, I think, again, going back to Billy Beane, I think he used this whether he realized it or not, because he was experiencing a significant amount of pain. He knew he wasn't going to be able to compete against these large market teams. His job was on the line, and he needed to make a decision. He had to change. He had to do something different, and he had to begin questioning, again, the conventional wisdom, the old ways of doing things. And as the end result, he not only achieved his goal, but he changed baseball in the process. So again, it's using pain and pleasure to our advantage. So if you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also recommend you visit my website at teachlyuniversity.com, where you can view all my lectures and subscribe to my email list when you get the latest news and information related to Teachly University. So thank you so much for watching this lecture, and I'll see you next time.